Skyrim is a giant phenomenon, this goes without saying. But why is it so polarizing? Some people say it's garbage, some that it's a masterpiece. I wasted a little bit too much time to check on some random opinions on YouTube, and now I'm going to tell you what do their takes have in common and why does this game invoke such opposing emotions. It is really hard to judge Skyrim's feedback objectively because almost 1% of population bought this game allegedly. Let's make it 0.5. Bethesda loves reselling. So there are lots of opinions, especially from those who barely touched the medium of gaming beforehand. Let's start with things that are more or less universally acclaimed: atmosphere and exploration. Skyrim is indeed a giant handcrafted world, which encompasses many different places, architectural elements and biomes. The sheer scale and surrounding detail were unprecedented, setting a high bar for other open-world RPGs. The first boot up of Skyrim was indeed a very unique experience, because it felt like a limitless world where you can go wherever the hell you see and do whatever the hell you want to do. You just can't take away this feeling of adventure Skyrim gives you for the first time, and this of course stays true for many Elder Scrolls connoisseurs. The exploration is also something that gets a lot of good feedback. Most of this world is tightly packed and there is almost always something to do. You can chop wood, make love with this charming fellow, go on for bounties, break physics with your trusty horse — the bulls were not the integral part of them back then — build houses, kill dragons, and many more. Bethesda is also pretty good with the environmental storytelling, so it's a lot of fun to poke around and see those damn skeletons in funny poses. And all of that together creates this charming atmosphere that I felt in almost no game before. However, we wouldn't get it without the majestic tunes from Jeremy Soule, and this is another topic which nobody dares to complain about. I can't even imagine the amount of people whose depression was cured by hunting fireflies in the moonlit night listening to the calming melody of Secunda. What a beautiful and heartwarming feeling it is to hear Streets of Whiterun going through the city under the same name to finally sell your countless dragon bones. I also just love how Jeremy Soule pulls a sort of a string through all of the Elder Scrolls games he worked on. From the main theme, to some lesser known yet integral songs that constitute the Elder Scrolls' atmosphere. You feel as if you are in the same world throughout the games, where each different part of them has some familiar tunes, but with their own kick that represents the region and its culture. This aspect makes the game tightly connected, overwhelmingly alluring, and I don't know,
just magical.
It's really a shame that Jeremy will most likely not be a part of the next Elder Scrolls. The other aspect which proponents of Skyrim advocate for is the accessibility of the game. For many people, Skyrim became their first game where you play as people with pointy ears who fight dragons, and many people praise the smooth introduction into this foreign for lots of folks world. And we can actually see that in almost every aspect of the game. It is pretty friendly lore-wise, it doesn't bombard you with crazy exposition or giant amounts of dialogues. We can see the main conflict of the region, as well as the Dragonborn jazz almost right from the get-go. All of that is connected to the rich history of this continent, however, you don't really need to go in depth in order to enjoy the game. If you really want to, you can jump into the books and unravel the crazy and obscure realm of Tamriel, but it's not a requirement. Some simple stories, no morally ambiguous choices, only some easily digestible fantasy fiction. Exactly what you need after a long day at work. This same principle is applied to the gameplay as well. The auto-leveling introduced in Oblivion was refined, so now you can embark on almost any journey at any level. Nothing stops you from doing that, and that's really sweet. Those are more or less the main aspects that get a lot of praise, and all in all, Skyrim is a perfect gateway drug into the world of fantasy, adhering to the needs of a wider audience without overwhelming it. Bethesda were also lucky enough to release it during the transition times, where gaming from being a niche hobby for those who fear sunlight and women became a thing for almost anyone who wants to diversify their sources of endorphins laying in front of their TV. It was for sure a commercially right decision to make the Elder Scrolls more accessible, and the sheer amount of the sold copies only proves this point. This game became a golden vein, being resold hundreds of times, reinforcing Bethesda's sureness of them going the right track, which also rendered them being closed for almost any criticism. And even at the time there was some, mostly from those becoming irrelevant, archaic, old parent cellar dwelling fans who called this appeal to a wider audience dumbing down and perceived everything as a betrayal. Yet those voices were never taken seriously by Bethesda, so they rolled on in the piles of money, selling yet another Skyrim version and some community-made mods on top of that. Fast forward to a decade and I suppose we all know what Bethesda has become now. But is that possible to trace this decline to Skyrim? In my opinion, it certainly is. It is of course a little bit unfair to give valid criticism to a game that is already 13 years old, but if it's okay to resell it in 2022 in an almost unchanged state, I think it's only fair to criticize it through the modern lenses, and many creators who took it upon themselves would most likely agree with me. So let's check the other side with some commonly made criticism. Hey, I really try to put my soul into those videos, so if you've enjoyed this one by now, I'd appreciate you subscribing. This would mean a world to me, and you can unsub at any time. Thanks. We will begin with the thing that is seen as universally best part of Skyrim: atmosphere and exploration. And of course, as far as atmosphere goes, it's more of a taste thing. Many people claim that Skyrim could have been a much more interesting and unique place akin to Morrowind, and I kind of support this point of view, but the game is already pretty damn atmospheric, so to touch upon that would be petty, to say the least. I think most of the people would agree that Skyrim did a solid job on this one. The exploration, however, is a one completely other topic, where I can agree with most of negative evaluations. Skyrim is indeed a ginormous game. It is commercialized as something where you can practically live, and at first the illusion of the giant unrestricted world works very well. But if you played the game for more than 200 hours, which is alright for a game of such scale, you'd most likely feel that something is a bit off. After a few dozen quests, you'll notice a certain pattern. A guy with a few repetitive lines, or someone from some major quest lines who isn't that interesting either, would send you to an X, which is either a cave, a regular ruin, a dwarven ruin, a fort, or a burial site, ask you for a B, and reward you with usually a crappy C or a few hundred coins. There are lots of possibilities. You might build a house, get a wife, or chop some wood, but those mechanics have no depth or utility, so you'd most likely do it only a few times and forget about it completely. If you are a more or less regular human being that didn't really have any other experiences with RPGs and been playing Skyrim from time to time up to a few hundred hours and then dropped it, you wouldn't even notice that repetitiveness, or it wouldn't really bother you, and Skyrim will forever be this wonderful fairy tale with endless possibilities and an enormous world in your memory. If you, however, like me, resemble this cat IRL and have spent an embarrassingly large chunk of your life inside of this world, you have most likely seen the Bethesda's magic being dispelled and recognized how empty and unconnected this world actually is. And this is where we come to the next thing Bethesda is notorious for: writing and cinematic value. I think exactly this part is best understood in contrast, so here I'd like to use, I'm sorry for being cliché, Witcher 3 as a comparison. I know that it's a little bit unfair, but come on. We had some good writing since Mesopotamian times, and considering how much money CD Projekt and Bethesda have put into their games in comparison, I think it's more or less fair technology-wise. Let's have an example of a regular-ass fetch quest. One of the first quests in the White Garden is the frying pan one. Hear how it begins.
Lost your key, ma'am?
No, not me key, me pan. It's always sat there empty, this hut. That is, till the night afore the battle. A man arrived, walked right in like 'twere his own. Was standing at me window, peering at the goings-on. He must have heard me, 'cause next I knew, there he was, coming my way.
Breaching inside, we find a dead body, and if we use the detective mode from Batman, we understand that the guy is a spy that used the band's Black Rust to write a report, through which we can get a glimpse into the conflict happening in the region a little bit closer. And here is a quest in the 5th Scrolls, which is a little bit similar to the aforementioned one.
I am. I came into Arkay's light after the Great War. So many died by my hands, my magics. I'm fortunate that Kust and the people of Falkreath have come to accept me as one of their own. Could you do an old elf a favour? I misplaced my journal in a cave I was exploring. I'll pay for its return.
In it, we help an old elven veteran who, out of remorse for taking so many lives, became an archpriest. We get his journal, which gives us an opportunity to look into the Great War conflict from Thalmor perspective, and this allows us to get some deeper insight into it as well. Both of those quests make the world deeper and allow us to explore it a little. However, in Skyrim's case, the quest is more or less an exception, because in many other instances you just fetch a sword or steal some statue and get a thank you with nothing interesting behind it. In The Witcher's case, it's just one of the many and many different and interesting side quests this game has to offer. And most of the time you do them not because of some arbitrary reward, they are lame in both games, but because of the interesting characters you meet. You might object that it's mostly because Skyrim is not cinematic and doesn't have as good of an engine, and I can't really argue with that, though nobody made Bethesda be those paranoid goons afraid of someone leaking their precious and hire only a few voice actors and make them record their lines in alphabetical order to spare some cash yet lose any theatrical value. One more time, considering the budgets and scales of both games, as well as the overall experience in game development of both studios, I think it was an intentional decision of Bethesda to cut the budget in this particular place where CD Projekt doubled down on this crucial RPG part and got this delicious gourmet game. As far as writing goes, after Morrowind, Bethesda was never good. In Skyrim, we at least have some fascinating lore, created by some very talented people that used to work for them. So we can ignore all of the blandness to get deeper into it. Yet most of the people do that in spite of the writing instead of for it. And it is very, very sad. This is a pretty important part because it could have transformed Skyrim from already one of the best games on the market into the masterpiece of all time. If it would have had characters on the level of Raoul from New Vegas, Smiling Jack from Bloodlines, or Rex from Mass Effect, this could have been something completely else. Instead, I can only remember some annoying jerks or those who you meet the most, so you remember their lines by heart. Most of them don't have no personality, they are just bland status that are there to fill up your miscellaneous part of the journal. Serana is an exception, yet exceptions only prove the rule. Another flaw of Skyrim is the auto-leveling and fighting system in general. all of the praise for the accessibility of Skyrim now can be completely reversed and put on its head. It might be cool to get into the game after work and see that you can go anywhere without anything stopping you, stroll about, fight some damage sponges and go to sleep. And if you don't play many games in general, you might be okay with such experience. But for some salad-dwelling fellas like myself, games are another place where they can get a challenge and overcome it. But what kind of challenge could a game offer if it could be beaten on the first level no problem? Why do I even need to level up? We have already established that Skyrim doesn't really have the most engaging narrative. It is proven by how most of you watching this video haven't even beaten this game till the end. So what incentive does it have to do something if your actions don't really mean anything in terms of getting better? I mean, you do get better, but for example, the difference between high-level Nerevarine and high-level Dovahkiin is just staggering. In the older scroll, everything is hostile. You come through adversities, which mostly consist of this maze of menus and pretty archaic fighting system, yet with time you earn your place as a demigod among puny mortals, and you feel fucking incredible. In Skyrim, you live in this communist dream world where no matter what you do, you just stay on approximately same level as your comrades. And God forbid you leveled up your alchemy instead of fighting skills, because the Draugrs in the crypts have no interest in getting educated. They are getting better only physically, so after a few smithing or alchemy level ups, you might even gotten worse than before in comparison. I am not a fan of the auto-leveling, to say it mildly. As for the fighting system, I don't think that it's a giant problem, to be honest. It is clunky for sure, you don't really need to manage your stamina, so it just became a filler stat, but it does its job alright and it became much better in comparison to Oblivion, so I wouldn't whine in this regard that much. There is of course some minor stuff that would have taken too much time to unravel, but I think you got the idea in general. What can I say in conclusion? I've invested some unspeakable amount of time into this game and was on the both sides of the barricade. As a kid, I was disappearing in this world for days, and for me this game was one of the best things in the whole wide world. However, I've been replaying it from year to year, and with each circle around the sun I was subjecting myself to other games and stories. I played Morrowind after I had played Skyrim, and overlooking the age, this game made me in love with its world. Afterwards, returning to the 5th scroll, I couldn't look at it in the same way. That's why I can completely understand all of the anger that the older fans have, as well as the fanatism of the newer players. I think that the old school fans have invested some unhealthy amount of time into it, overlooking everything good that this game has, being laser focused on what is not good about that. The fanboys or the people who have private life, however, either don't really care about it, had their sweet time with the game and can't really relate to the criticism, or so religiously defensive about what they hold dear that they wouldn't even hear the blasphemy others tell to throw onto their beloved product. In my opinion, Skyrim is a phenomenon, and no matter how much you criticize it, you can't really take away the magic it has in it. Countless of lifetimes people spent inside of it only proves that. However, in my opinion, even the creators themselves can't really replicate what they created, drifting further and further into some other direction. Even now, Bethesda tries to analyze why people return to Skyrim, and what is this magic that makes people to come back over and over. And I presume that they understand that magic a little bit wrong. In the last games, Bethesda's focus has drifted from exploring to more social elements like building, crafting, farming, all of that mumbo-jumbo. I think, though, that is a little bit wrong, and that people come back mostly because they don't really have any alternatives. They want to get that shot of nostalgia, getting that same atmosphere, clear out some of the good old dungeons, or just install thousands of mods to make the game into Dark Souls or their personal harem or whatever. Not because they have a farm, an adoptive daughter whose only trait is asking for presents. Go get a job, you're 12 in a medieval setting. I am a little bit afraid that Bethesda comes to their roots with automatic generation, be it radiant quests or landscapes, and it seems that they have an intent to make it their priority. Todd Howard wants to create a world where you want to live and explore as much as possible. And ironically, the only worlds created by Bethesda where you want to do that are those that were created by hand. I think that exactly this obsession with scale kind of restricted Skyrim, and hopefully after dozens of giant yet empty worlds from other studios and a few of their own, Bethesda will look back and create something smaller and more densely packed akin to Morrowind. And if you want to understand why I adore Morrowind so much and how the Elder Scrolls' lore was stagnating throughout the years, you might click on this video in the middle. Thank you very much for your attention. Write down what do you think about the 5th Elder Scroll and stay tuned because there is much more to come.